Aquí, rectora, en el azul.
Good morning and good evening to all the participants of Kairos Educational Forum. I'd really like to share a warm welcome to each and every one of the participants in this forum, where we'll be addressing the theme, the challenges of education in Africa and the need for a third social contract from education, where no one is left behind. This is a very important discussion, especially since COVID-19 pandemic has caused disruptions in tertiary education globally, exposing significant short and long-term challenges facing higher education systems and institutions. These disruptions have amplified the socioeconomic inequalities in higher education, as well as raised questions of the social relevance of universities that need to be addressed from a collective view. But before going into our discussion today, I'd like to pass the microphone to our main leader of Kairos initiative, Ingeniero Telemaco Taravera, which I'm very proud to say is a visionary and highly compromised Nicaraguan with quality and pertinent education in general, and specifically education from, with, and for indigenous, Black, and Afro-descendant people that has made him worthy of numerous recognition, including an honorable doctorate in humanity by one of the Intercultural Community University of the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. He is a very innovative person and uses the slogan always, "We make our way by walking." At this moment, Ingeniero Telemaco Taravera will share with us the welcoming remarks.
Thank you, my dear Rector Alta Hooker. I have the pleasure to say hello on behalf of Kairos to all the people, families, and communities of all African countries, as well as the educational community of that great continent. And to tell you that as Kairos, we are to work from, with, and for Africa, together with the other region of the planet, for the transformation of education, for the construction of the better society for all, where no one is left behind. Africa is not one more continent for Kairos. It is a special and very important continent with many difficulties, but with great potential and extraordinary people. We would not be able to conceive of Kairos' mission without working from, with, and for Africa hand in hand with the other continents, regions, and countries. As Kairos, we are committed to working at the macro and micro level, at the international, regional, national, community, and institutional level to enhance knowledge, education, science, technology, art, culture, sport, and knowledge to build a better society for all. To move in this direction, the transformation of education is necessary as a fundamental means of full realization and development with justice, dignity, respect, prosperity, and good living of individuals, families, communities, people, countries, regions, all around the world. I want to thank all the panelists. Professor Tawana Kupe from South Africa, Professor Charles Igwe from Nigeria, Dr. Kambikambi from Zambia, Professor Amadou Valle from Senegal, and Professor Paulo Speller from Brazil. I want to thank also to my dear Dr. Rector Nsukka, moderator of this important forum, and to Richard Gerber for his important reflection and support that we're going to see at the end of this forum. A special greeting and our appreciation to Professor Tawana Kupe for his support for the organization of this forum, as well to all the support staff of the University and Pretoria and staff of Kairós. We invite all the people of Africa to be part of this movement for the transformation of education, for the construction of a better society for all, where no one is left behind, making the third contract of education a reality. You, dear academic friends, young people, and people of Africa in general, count on us, because we count on you. Let's go ahead. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you very much to the people from Africa and everywhere that will see this forum indirectly or in the social media. And we are sure that this will be important point for the future discussion and action in order to improve the education for the transformation of the society. Thank you very much.
At this moment, the panelists for the virtual forum are leaders of higher education institutions in Africa, and they will exchange in a discussion on how to initiate a third social contract from education which leaves no one behind by responding to the following broad questions. How should African universities rethink new ways of teaching, learning, and research in response to the current and emerging disruptive tendencies, including COVID-19? And how can African universities promote new forms of collaboration and partnership to reimagine a future for higher education and a new society which leaves no one behind? We will now present our panelists. I'll share with you that Professor Tawana Kupe, Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Pretoria, South Africa, since January 2019, holds a BA honor and master's degree in English from the University of Zimbabwe. Professor Kupe has an important record of publications, outer journal articles, books, and book chapters in his main discipline, which is media studies and journalism. Professor Kupe is a popular invited speaker, academic expert, and regularly comments on issues of media performance and radio, television, and the print media in South Africa for local and international media. Professor Charles Igwe, he's the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Nigeria, a soil scientist, and holds a doctorate degree from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and a diploma from Agricultural University of Norway. He was appointed the 15th Vice-Chancellor of the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, in June 2019. Professor Igwe is known as a passionate teacher and researcher who is credited with over 90 scientific publications on soil conservation and food security. Dr. Tamala Kambikambi is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of the University of Zambia. She holds a PhD in agronomy from the University of Zambia. Dr. Kambikambi has served in various public roles, including chairperson of the National Governing Council for the African Peer Review Mechanism, chairperson and board member of the Zambia Daily Mail, and chairperson of the Audit Committee on the board of the Zambia Development Agency, and was also the national chairperson for the Zambia Women's Lobby. Professor Amadou Mibawe, rector of the Cheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal, a professor of economics and public policies. Previously, he has served as the Dean of the School of Economics and Management at the same university and chair of the Francophone Research Network in Economics. He has been a consultant for many regional and international organizations, and he has numerous publications on development, economics, and Africa. He is a non-resident senior researcher fellow at the Brookings Institution of Washington, D.C. Professor Paulo Speller, a Brazilian academic, was elected as Secretary General of the Organization of Ibero-American States of Education, Science, and Culture for the period of 2015-2018. His experience is in the area of education and political science, with emphasis in state and government, working mainly with the topics of education, public policies, educational policy, and the foundations of education. He has held several national and international political responsibilities, such as advisor of the United Nations of Education, Science, and Culture, UNESCO, of the Advisory Committee for the celebration of the World Conference on Higher Education. At this moment, then, we'll start with the participation, and we'll ask each one of the panelists to please make their presentation in the same order that they were presented. Each participant will have a first moment of 8 minutes to share his or her ideas. Afterwards, there will be another moment of 3 minutes, either to complement on the first initial idea or to comment to what one of the panelists had said. Dr. Tawana, will you please begin? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nsukka, for that invitation to make a contribution. I'm grateful for this Kairos Forum to be able to debate with my colleagues from the rest of our beloved continent, Africa. In the context of Africa, I think one has to start by making a few propositions that education is vitally important to lifting people out of poverty, as well as for enabling social mobility, and for people to improve their own lives, to improve the lives of their own families, their own communities, to make a contribution to national sectors, whether the public sector, the private sector, or civil society. And also is generally key to the development of the human resource development, the human capital development, necessary to drive socio-economic development so that the continent can realize or address one big challenge. One big challenge the continent has is that it's a continent that is rich in natural resources and rich in, of course, in humanity, in that it's the population is growing, a fairly young population. Some people estimate that 60% of the population are people who are 35 years younger also. So it's a youthful population. It is abundant land, mineral resources, forestry, trees. It should be a prosperous continent. It should be a democratic continent. It should be a continent where everybody has access to education. But the reality is contrary to that. The reality is that the richness of the continent in human and natural resources is not matched by its level of development at this point in time. And there are many causes for this. There's a long history of slavery, colonialism, and also there is a long history now of a mismanagement of the economies and the politics of the continent by those who have assumed power. Inappropriate policies that are not evidence-based, that do not tap into the knowledge produced by local universities and other universities. But the continent is still in certain sectors quite robust. 10 African countries are among some of the top 10 countries, among some of the top countries who have a high economic growth. Of course, that is going to be affected by COVID-19 now, which is a global pandemic that is affecting everybody's economy. But beyond COVID, you will find that several African countries and regions still exhibit elements of economic growth that is important for socio-economic development. I want to be very clear here that I do not conflate economic growth with socio-economic development, because also one of the things that characterize the continent still is poverty, high rates of poverty, high rates of unemployment, and growing inequality between those with access to resources, access to education, both within Africa and also people like myself who have been educated abroad. And so those growing inequalities and growing poverty also have affected disproportionately women, so gender inequality, gender-based violence, including femicide, youth unemployment is very, very high, and also lack in many African countries of an education appropriate to the 21st century. Here, I would like to pivot to the impact on education of COVID-19. But I want to just, before I do that, say that the factors that have affected access to education in Africa are not only COVID. COVID has just exacerbated existing challenges, and these existing challenges was the unevenness of the schooling system, the unevenness of the university system, the unevenness of technical and vocational education, so that you find schools that are not appropriately equipped with 21st century technologies, leading to people getting qualifications that are not appropriate to an emerging labor market, which is driven by technology, globalization, internationalization, and all of those factors. Now, what has happened with COVID is COVID has actually shown a magnifying glass effect on all of these challenges. But from where I sit, I think COVID-19 and all of the challenges the continent has faced, and it shows also the opportunities that are available. Every cloud has a silver lining, and you should never put a crisis to waste. So what are the opportunities, if you like? Depending on the country, of course, and depending on educational institutions in each country. If I might give an example of my university, the University of Pretoria, we have been a university that has been using technology for teaching and learning since 1998. But from 2016, because there were student protests that closed down the universities, we accelerated use of technology to be able to teach students online. So now when COVID-19 came and there was a lockdown, we moved all of our teaching online. But before COVID-19 came and between 2016 and now, we were using what we call hybrid teaching and learning. Our students go to class, but before they go to class, they must access all their educational materials online. 96% of our undergraduate courses have a substantive online presence. In other words, you can take them online 100%. But of course, that is not our philosophy. Our philosophy is that education is a social activity. It must have both the contact element as well as the online component. So at University of Pretoria, You prepare by going online as a student. In class, we're going to use online plus contact teaching, and post-class, you must engage by consolidating your materials online. We record our lectures, we put all of the lecture materials online and so on. So that we call blended or hybrid teaching and learning. Now, what COVID did was to disrupt us. Now we have to rely only on the online part and not the contact part. So we believe our future is actually returning back to a hybrid model, not just online model. But of course, we're going to use a range of models at the University of Pretoria, and many other South African universities and other African universities also follow the same model. Some courses will be online only, some will be hybrid, some might be contact. We are also exploring the use of virtual laboratories and virtual reality for some lab experiences and looking into emerging and new technologies. So the point I'm making here is that despite the fact that Africa suffers socioeconomic development, is not uptaken, or digital technology has been undertaken in uneven ways, and that the cost of data, the cost of computers, laptops, and even mobile phones is very, very expensive. And the fact that poverty is very, very high, is that an opportunity exists in investing in digital technologies and digital infrastructure, and that if everybody could get onto that digital infrastructure through public, private, and international investment, it will be able to, in essence, equalize access. Because what I'm also talking about here in Africa is uneven access to education, uneven access, particularly to quality education, even access, especially to universities like mine that have the means to be able to invest in a single year, $20 million in IT infrastructure, as we did last year. When we did that last year, we didn't know that the pandemic was coming, but this has helped us very much. Our students and our lecturers don't need data to go online. They can do everything online, teach, learn, do examinations, do assessments, and so on. But I want to emphasize again that this is not common even in South Africa. We have 26 public universities. 8 of those universities have not been able to resume teaching because of the lockdown. They can't go online. 10 universities have managed, but they're having problems. And about another 8 or so, including mine, have been able to, in a fairly smooth way, get online. But again, I want to insist, this is not ideal for us. Education is social engagement. You do not only get information and learn information or learn practical scientific techniques and methodologies. You also learn to engage with other people. You gain emotional intelligence. You learn how to engage. You learn how to collaborate. And these are the 21st century graduate attributes that are needed. Ability to be adaptable, flexible, ability to be technology literate, ability to be data literate, ability to do critical analysis and thinking, and ability to exercise emotional intelligence, and ability to engage, the ability to understand diversity of people and diversity of the world. So if you like, Africa is an opportunity here, despite the digital divide, because there is clearly a digital divide. Those with access to technologies and those without access to those technologies. This will deepen the inequalities, if you like. But no problem is beyond solution. The solution is major public investment in the technological backbone and infrastructure, augmented by private sectors. So in South Africa, for example, we discussed with the telecommunications companies, the mobile companies, 2, 1, zero-rate data for educational sites, and also to give special packages for data for those universities, unlike mine, who do not have a platform to do dataless education. It's important also that some of the problems that Africa faces are addressed through education. Gender inequality is also rooted in unequal gender access. Youth unemployment is rooted in that. The divide between the urban and the rural in Africa, and the more developed, some of those African countries with certain sectors of their industries and economies that are very well developed. That can be addressed by educating, skilling the population, and that in essence begins to level the playing field, because evidence shows that a person with a degree in Africa, he has a better chance of getting a job. In South Africa, graduate unemployment is only 6%. That means people with a degree, they only suffer 6% of unemployment. But youth unemployment in general in South Africa is now 30%. Some people will say, if you lower the age of what you call youth, it might even go up to 50%. Now, if you take graduates from my university, 93% of them get a job or go to postgraduate education 6 months after graduating. So there is concrete proof that education is the decider for social social mobility and for fortunes, but also it is proof that education supplies to the economy and to society the necessary human capital and skills needed to drive socio-economic change and to address the sustainable development goals. If you look at all of the sustainable development goals, except goal number 17, which is about partnerships, all of those sustainable development goals are applicable to the African situation as well as other countries in the global south, or usually called underdeveloped countries or developing economies, middle-income countries, low-income countries, whatever the nomenclature is among economists and sociologists. The issue really is that the one single deciding factor, the one equalizing factor, the one mobility factor, the one factor that will drive people out of poverty is going to be not just education in general, but a quality education that keeps up with the times, and keeping up the times in the 21st century means that an education that has a strong online presence complemented or complementing a strong contact presence that is delivered by teachers that are very well trained, both the content as well as the technology. This applies to research as well. South Africa contributes less than 1% to some of the high quality research in highly cited journals and others. We need to be contributing much more knowledge, because knowledge is also contextual. You can't import all forms of knowledge. Knowledge is global, yes, but also there's a contextual dimension to it. The lack of African generated knowledge is also the extent to which there are limited solutions to particular African contexts and African conditions. And so what we're trying to do in Africa is also to build a research-intensive universities. So there's an association called African Research Universities Association. There's 17 universities at the moment. It should have more, but it started here in South Africa and is growing. Those are universities that dedicate themselves to doing high-level research and research collaborations, to teaching, including in their enrollment, more postgraduate students, and also in ensuring that they have the capacity and the infrastructure to do high-level research. Laboratories, scanning, equipment, data centers. My university, for example, is a big data and data science institute, because data is the new gold. If you don't understand data these days, you're going to struggle with handling information, handling fieldwork, and also being able to analyze things at a fast pace. Well, that's very, very important, that research is seen as, especially at the university level, key to the education mission, because research is about producing knowledge. Knowledge is about interpreting and understanding a situation and translating out of that understanding and analysis solutions that are sustainable and applicable. So Prof. Altahooka, I don't know how many minutes is left for me. Another 2 minutes? No, I'll finish my time.
Okay, we'll give you 2 minutes. Are
2 minutes,
you?
okay. Okay, so yeah, perhaps I'll use one, but let me use all two, I think. I think it's very, very important then also that we link teaching and learning and research to a third mission of the university, that is social engagement and impact on society. You see, there's a problem. You see, individuals can come into a university and get a degree and go and get a good job and they're fine for themselves. Of course, they will contribute to the company or to the public organization they with, but that is not enough. A university is an institution to make a decisive intervention into the challenges facing the society and the country, the region, and the continent. So social engagement, that social engagement must arise out of the teaching and out of the research. So at the University of Pretoria, 33,000 of our 55,000 students are engaged in community social engagement. We also belong to the Social Responsibility Network. We are one of the top 15 universities in that area. And so what we do is we make sure that social engagement is either embedded in the teaching or embedded in research. So what we don't want is the social engagement where some group of students and staff members say, there are poor people there. Let's go and give them food, let's go give them blankets. They can do that. But that must also come out of how are you going to make sure those people are not dependent on the handouts from the professors and the students? And we empower local communities to deal with. So many of our students, for example, spend their weekends in townships and in low-income communities, helping the young students study better and be able to qualify to come to our university. So they spend the whole weekend with them, helping them study, do their work, clean their school. And then when the time comes to apply to university, they help them to apply to the university to get bursaries. Then that student is no longer dependent on the handouts from the professors and the students. But that is also giving back to society. So I see a triangle. If we're going to have a third contract, a social contract for education, it must be very clear about the challenges facing society. Underdevelopment, low socioeconomic development, associated problems of gender inequality, youth unemployment, being left behind digitally, and all of those things, and the ability to access good jobs. And so the university must make an intervention in that. Otherwise, it remains a colonial edifice, disconnected from society and producing a small group of elite people who go on to make money for themselves or to succeed for themselves. Education must be one of the drivers of social change, and do so in an explicit way. Even the way we craft our research agendas, they must be challenge-led. What problem are you trying to solve in society through your research? I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Tawana, for sharing with us your ideas about higher education in Africa, and especially in Pretoria, what it meant, the COVID-19, what happened to economy, but also the opportunities and the difficulties that it had presented. The way you all have been organizing yourself to be able to address this new moment, and the idea of working with a mixed model, and how this idea of working online has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, and also losing all that contact that diversity means, and the different challenges that you are facing. Thank you once more for your participation. And then we'll continue with Dr. Tamala Kambikambi.
Good afternoon to everyone, and sorry about that. Thank you very much to Kairos, and good afternoon to everyone, especially my fellow panelists. It's good to be amongst eminent members like yourselves. And when I was looking at the bios that have been given about you, I could see most of you have spent a lot of time in academia. I have as well, but I also balanced up with a lot of public service. So I come in with that angle as well. Hence my talk. I want to more or less bring in a lot of conceptual questions about how higher education should be conducted and how the third social contract should come on board. So to begin my talk, I think firstly, I want to also mention that I come in with experience from both the private sector, where I was at a private university before I joined the public university. And hence, I'll see how I can balance up those two. But to begin my talk, I think I want to mention that higher education is in a critical period where there's need to start rebalancing the internal and the external relations of the authority that it holds, of the power that it has, and also of the responsibility that it has to society. So these institutions of higher learning, these universities, are expected to make contributions, and it's good to come after such an eloquent speaker like Professor Kupe, who articulated most of those issues. And in doing that, these institutions should contribute to economic growth of the countries. And in a continent like Africa, where we've got such a huge population of youth, we need to be contributing to job creation, and not just formal jobs, but also entrepreneurial, so that our degrees, our diplomas should be looking at how employable are we ending up with this person in terms of them employing themselves or getting employed, and of course to innovation. Africa has a lot of problems, and our solutions should be by and large homegrown. And we as universities should be at the center of doing that. Now, closely related to what I've just said is the emergence of this third mission. And I think this is, to me, what I got as the issue we should be concentrating on, which reflects the expected engagements that higher education should be providing to society. To me, I'm not going to pretend to have the answers, but I want to be putting these questions on the table for all of us, including myself. I have certain thoughts around some of the answers to these questions, but all of us should then be interrogating these questions. I've already indicated I've had stints with both the private and the public universities, and hence I've seen the differences in governance styles, and those have an impact on how that university is also going to be contributing to society. So how should these universities be governed? And when you ask that, how should they be financed? Because as the saying goes, the one who pays the piper dictates the tune. Are those people then dictating the tune, and is it in sync with what the society is looking out for from these universities? What type of physical facilities? I've seen certain universities in a small corner, in a small house, and still claiming or being a university, whereas there are some with huge buildings. But is that one in that small house giving a lesser service to society than maybe the one which is highly branded? These are questions we should be asking ourselves. And how come even that small one is still being sustained with number of students still enrolling there? There's something that is being said there. It's meeting some of our society's needs, but I'll have something to say about that later. And who should be admitted? I think this is a very cardinal issue. We have this issue of For example, I think for a long time in my country, you need to have 5 O levels before you can get in. But there are people who never achieved those in the first place for various reasons. Some not because they were down academically, but because of the many challenges that they have. Should we not allow them to get in with certain provisos? But those are questions we should be asking. And what should be taught? Where, when, how, by whom? Because teaching, yes, in academic institutions is mostly by academics, but we know that learning is more than that, okay? Then what freedom should be associated with provision or coming up of these ideas that the students and the young ones are going to have? What voice should the faculty, on the other hand, also have beyond the students? What experiences outside the classrooms and off campus should be brought in to be part of what we should credit these students as a legitimate part of them having been part of the tertiary education? I was happy to hear what my predecessor just said, that half of their students spend time over the weekends in communities. How are they crediting that to them having been part of the learning process? And when you do that, what type of reward systems as well as sanctions are you giving? Those who are going out, how are you crediting them? Those who are remaining cooped up in their rooms, how are you sanctioning them to make sure that they are going out there? Because this is important. Learning is not just about reading the books, thinking about the formulae and all those things. It's about the virtues. It's about the values, such as empathy, such as kindness, such as the emotional intelligence that these young people will go out with there. Now, as you question all this, you find that, yes, today you might have answer A, but society is not stagnant, it's dynamic. So as society changes, this social contract will also have to change. And unfortunately, currently, society is changing so fast. So how quick can we also be following through to ensure that our social contract is in sync with how the society is changing? Now, in closing, I just want to bring one final part of this, because I'm trying to stick to my time. Professor Hooker, you know, women, we keep to time. Quality in doing all these changes, how do we ensure that quality is being maintained? Because in mass education, something will have to give. Put differently, how are we going to serve the community with all this variety in ways that will ensure we don't lose that intellectualism that is associated with universities? Just to say something about my university, the University of Zambia, COVID hit us, and we were at a point where we were about to actualize our strategic plan, where we had planned by 30th of June 2020 to ensure that all our content was online. So when COVID hit, it actually just accelerated that. Yes, we were caught a bit off balance, but not totally staggering. We stood and we are still standing. There are still challenges. I noted quite a number of similarities with what Professor Kupe was mentioning. Our internet service providers have come on board. They are giving our students free online, free access to the learning platforms. But of course, it worries us. We've got quite a number of students who are out there. Zambia is a big country. Our internet penetration is not the best. So we know we've got a few students out there, outliers. We were questioned. We've got some of our students who are differently abled. They don't have sight, they are blind. We have not moved to Braille. There are those challenges. We still are trying to work with them. But I think I'll come back in the last 3 minutes so that I leave time for my colleagues to bring out what they have to say. Thank you, Professor Hooker.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamala Kambikambi. And I'd like to ask excuse from Professor Charles Igwe. He will be continuing, but I'd just like to say before he takes the word that Dr. Tamala set a lot of questions here that has a lot to do with people that are in communities, people that believes a lot in their university, people that wants a different type of living according to their own way of being. In the next forum, Dr. Ingeniero Telemaco has prepared a forum with interculturality, Afro-descendant and indigenous people and the community needs. So the idea of what he's doing is what we will say in Spanish, tejiendo. He's knitting a system where we can all hold. So I'm really, really happy of the challenges that you have been talking about here. And I'm sure we'll continue addressing them. Thank you very, very much. And then we continue with Professor Charles Igwe.
Yeah, thank you very much, the moderator. I bring you sincere greetings from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. And this afternoon, or this evening, depending on where you are in the continent, I'm going to talk on the navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, the University of Nigeria Nsukka experience. The University of Nigeria Nsukka, otherwise known as UNN, is the Nigeria's oldest university, established in 1960 during our independence celebration. UNN is a comprehensive university with 3 campuses and with about 60,000 students. Initially, they were all, residential, but right now we have only about 10,000 students being accommodated in our hostels and in our campuses. The other students live in hired and rented accommodation in town previously, and up till this moment, up till the moment of COVID-19, the in-person attendance was the main mode of teaching. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused the greatest disruption of educational system in modern history. Most schools and learning spaces were closed by the orders of the government. Over 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries and all continents were affected. The closure impacted 94% of the world's student population, while a higher percentage of up to 99% was affected in low and lower middle income countries, such as my own country. There are fears that recent gains in education opportunities may be lost, especially for students from vulnerable families. The University of Nigeria, Nsukka, has to respond to some of the emergency of the pandemic. In doing that, we had to close the university as directed by the national government. We also asked staff to stay at home with the exception of staff on emergency services, and enabled our own staff to work remotely from home, and resorted to virtual meeting, just like we are now having to run the university, and had to set up an advisory committee on the COVID-19 pandemic, embarked on awareness program. Now that there is clamor for reopening of the university and for regular school activities, how do we prepare? How is the university preparing for the reopening? The university is yet to reopen since the campuses were closed. In readiness for reopening, we have created awareness on safety practices, provided running water and soap for washing of hands at the entrances of offices and classroom. Just some few days ago, our Faculty of Engineering demonstrated a washing and sterilizing machine that has to be put in front of public places, produced by the university, designed by the university, and it's remotely touched. You don't need to switch on the tap. All you need to do is to show your hand, and the scanner will pick it up, and the activities will take place. We have to provide acquire requisite licenses for online learning, especially with the ICT, commence learning of staff, training of staff on use of learning management softwares, worked out strategies for the congesting classrooms by first reopening and splitting large classes. We have to face the reopening, assuming we are giving the go-ahead, and decongest the hostels, and also worked out how to decongest shared offices and spaces, and almost concluded arrangements for a COVID testing center on campus. How do we face the challenges? As we prepare to reopen, we know there is need to reevaluate our educational system and to truly achieve inclusive education. Our learning methodology needs to be revisited because it cannot be business as usual, as we know. And our main challenges include ensuring everyone is safe and suppressing the spread of the virus, and harmonizing the semester and academic calendars, supporting lecturers and students to adapt to a blended approach to teaching, and upgrading our IT infrastructure to enhance digitization, confronting the financial challenges of the pandemic on education, and ensuring no one is left behind. And how do we ensure that everyone is safe? We have to do the following. We've created awareness on safety practices, provide running water and soap, as I've mentioned earlier, for washing of hands at entrance of public places and classroom, introduce regulations on compulsory wearing of face masks. If you had looked at me earlier on, you would have seen me wearing my own, and worked out strategy for decongesting classrooms, e.g. splitting large classes, use large halls and open spaces for lectures. And we have worked out a strategy for decongesting hostels, and also worked out how to decongest shared offices and spaces. And this we have achieved by allowing some staff to work remotely and work from home, and working a strategy for testing all staff and students. We are trying to harmonize the semester and calendar because, as you may know, and as was the general practice throughout the whole world, UNN, that's our university, closed in March, just as about the time we were about to begin to take our first semester examination. Most postgraduate students and postgraduate programs and oral examinations were also rescheduled. and we are we are now trying to set the process of admitting new students, even though we are still on the midway of the previous semester, of the previous session. The final year classes should have been graduated by now, and fitting all this into the calendar as a major challenge. How do we upgrade? We are now trying to upgrade our infrastructure to our IT infrastructure to enhance digitization. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the digitalization gap between universities across the world. The planned migration to online teaching requires the upgrade of ICT infrastructure. This is important to ensure that all staff and students are able to function optimally. In addition to this, it will enable the university enhance her state of digitization. And how do we support the lecturers? Lecturers need additional skills to be able to adapt to their lectures, to be able to adapt their lectures to the online model. They also need new skills for online assessment. Training are also provided to lecturers to ensure all lecturers are able to adapt successfully to this new method of learning. All this, as we noted earlier on, involve some financial challenges. And how do we address it? The pandemic will push many countries, just like mine, and I believe other countries in the continent, into a recession. Nigeria is listed among the countries likely to be badly affected, and this will impact seriously on public finances, including education budget, especially in the low-income countries. This will further widen the gap between the standard of education in rich and poor nations. And to cope, management is adopting a number of strategies, and these strategies are prudent utilization of available resources, e.g., cutting down on trips, stroke travels, migration to digital platforms for meetings, and etc., etc. Prioritizing spending on health, safety, and digitization, and seeking new revenue sources such as IGR grants, collaborations, PPP, public partnership practice, donations, and sharing of resources with collaborators. COVID-19 and educational instability, how do we approach it? Prior to COVID-19, the problem of educational inequality was receiving attention in government and educational circles. The pandemic and the need of physical distancing has forced universities to migrate some of all their courses to online learning. This will require students to bear additional costs for acquiring smart devices such as laptops, tablets, and internet data subscriptions. Students would also require other forms of support from their families. Students from higher economic backgrounds are in a better position to receive these forms of support than those from the lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Poorer students would struggle to cope and may even drop out of school. Thus, the pandemic may widen the learning gap between the rich and the poor. Towards achieving inclusive education, it is widely feared that students from lower economic families may be left out in the new approach to learning. And to achieve inclusive education in which no one is left behind, we intend to expand our bandwidth capacity to continue to provide free internet access on campuses, seeking funds to provide a pool of smart devices that students can use at no cost, distribute audiovisual files for recorded lectures. We also intend to distribute print materials as alternative. And how do we intend to cope with the new forms of collaborations? It is obvious that institutional collaborations may not be the same again as a result of the pandemic. This is because of the expected reduction in the frequency with which people travel to attend academic meetings and events across the world. Again, this may favor elite institutions who can operate independently with a reduced need for entering into new networks and collaborations. Thus, African universities should strive to strengthen existing collaborations and establish new ones, even with peers in far-flung places. Because of the restrictions on international movement, African universities can take advantage of visual connections to, just as we are having right now, to build even more links and partnership and collaboration. This way, more partnership can be built at reduced cost. I want to thank you for listening. God bless all of us.
Thank you very much, Professor Charles Igwe, for your presentation, for sharing all the difficulties that and the disruption of education that was caused by the COVID-19. Also about the efforts you are doing to reorganize and to be able to address this moment. And also the analysis that you were making about the management of the strategies, the additional cost that it would mean to go online, and the preparation of teachers, but also that poorer families, maybe their children would be left behind. There are a lot of other things you said, which I'm sure will come out in the discussion, and I thank you deeply for your presentation. We will continue now with Professor Amadou Mabawe. Professor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm very happy to be part of this very important forum. I will, with your permission, share my screen because I would like to share with you some slides. Trying to do that. Do you see my screen? No?
No, I'm not. We aren't.
Okay, do you see it now?
No, Professor.
Oh, strange. Okay. And now do you see it?
No, yes, thank you. Yes, it's there.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to share my presentation in two different parts. In the first one, I'll discuss some challenges facing higher education in Africa, focusing on the situation in Francophone Africa, because my point is that even though we have some challenges which are common to almost all of our universities, we are also having some challenges that are likely to be peculiar to Francophone Africa. And I would like to highlight those. And secondly, I would like to try to explore some recommendations, as a way forward. Now the challenges. One of the biggest challenges we have is the demographic bulge. Here is the population pyramid for a standard African country, meaning that most of the population is young. And this is even more true for West Africa. West Africa hit the world records in terms of population growth. Let me remind you that the average annual population growth for Niger is 4% per annum, which is the highest in the world. And for neighboring countries like Burkina Faso, Senegal, Mali, and the like, we observe the same patterns. And another factor which is compounding that is the growth rate of population in cities. Urban population is growing sometimes double the national average. And these, of course, has some implications on higher education, as well as on some infrastructure like jobs. But here, the focus is on higher education. And here is one important implication. The discrepancy between resources and increase in the size of the students. These figures are from an old paper by Celestin Monga from Cameroon, Chantal Devarajan, then from the World Bank, and Kesekende. And to me, it's still very timely. What you have here is the discrepancy between the current expenditure on higher education and public expenditure required for expansion of higher education at current rates and unit cost. Okay, in dotted lines, on the dotted line, you have the increase of public expenditure that would be needed to match the current increase in population size in higher education. And in the plain line, you have, in dot line, is the projected resources, and in plain line, you have the actual resources, okay? And you can see that the discrepancy is real. The second slide I would like to share with you is the number of students as a multiple of the 2066 level in 2015. And you can see that for some countries, the number of students as a ratio of the 2006 level has been multiplied by sometime 5, a factor of 5 or more, okay? And the last slide I would like to share with you on that is the share of higher education in current population, current public expenditure on education. Okay, the share of higher education on in current expenditure on education, and you can see that sometimes it's 40%. Senegal is one of these cases. So all this to say that we have a very clear mismatch between the rate of growth of the youth and people we need to put in our universities and the resources which are available to put those young people in education. Okay, and so this is a very important challenge. One other important challenge, which is much more peculiar to Francophone Africa, is that higher education tends to be very highly politicized. You have a lot of political parties seeking influence at the universities. And beyond the legitimate corporate claims of students, usually you have also some very big influences from political parties outside the university. So politicization of higher education is a very important challenge. And this is much more true in Francophone Africa because of a very long tradition of higher education being politicized, even in the colonial area. Another challenge, which is also much more peculiar to Francophone African countries, is the obligation of state universities to accommodate all graduates from higher secondary education. By law, you cannot deny admission to a student. This is a law in France, and this is a law in most Francophone African countries. And the consequence is dramatic for Francophone African countries because, as I said earlier, the demographic dynamics is not the same in France as in Africa. So being obligated to accommodate all graduates of secondary education is a very big challenge facing universities. Another important challenge is unemployment rate, which tend to be higher for university graduates. For example, in Senegal, the unemployment rate for university graduates is as high as 30%, while for the national average is close to 12%. So this has to do with the orientation of higher education. For example, in my university, with a total size of population of close to 80,000, half of these students are studying humanities. Half of these students are registered in the Faculty of Humanities, okay? And most of what you study in humanities is not very much relevant to what the market readily needs. So these add to the challenge of the mismatch between the supply and demand of education. And this is even more true for higher education. Another big challenge is connectivity. With COVID, we have tried to shift to online education. And a very important hurdle we run to was the problem of connectivity. Because in some villages, you can barely have access to internet. And when students are sent out back to their villages from campuses, they sometimes do not have access to any connection, because in some villages in Senegal, you can barely have a connection to follow courses online. So this is a very important challenge. It has to do with bandwidth, but also it has to do with some spots on the national territory not being properly connected to internet. But the biggest challenge is financing higher education. Usually, our best universities are public universities and are state-owned, meaning that the government provides most of their funding. And again, with demographics following a very dynamic path and government resources being constrained, you have a very important challenge in public funding keeping pace with the needs. And this is a real problem, because another legacy of the French system is that, as you know, in French education is almost free, it's completely free. This is a very big difference between, for example, France and the UK, or France and the USA. In France, education is free, and education is free in also most Francophone African countries. So people sometimes just don't understand when you're charging some fees for education. Myself have had some difficulties when receiving some grants from some US-based foundations who require the students contribute a little bit to the fees of their education. And usually students don't want to do that. And also even the university is not very much prepared to doing that. So the model of financing higher education is a very unbalanced model, putting the burden of the financing on the shoulder of the government, with very few role to the parents. And sometimes the parents are wealthy and could easily afford to contribute. But the system is such that it's very hard to ask parents to contribute to their children's education. Now, what to do to address these challenges? Some of the solutions have already been spelled out by my predecessors, but I just would like to remind them and very briefly. One is the use of IT. IT will be critical to making us address the challenges related to quality while keeping costs low. But it means that the connectivity issues we have discussed earlier be properly addressed. So if we could make our education blended, having students only for a short period of time and delivering the bulk of the educational services online, these could dramatically lower the cost of education and improve access. The other solution, another solution would be a better expenditure targeting in the area of higher education. Some studies we have done in our department, our economics department, show that most students who are receiving subsidies or grants from the government could do without such a grant. Normally, public finance to students should be targeted only to poor students who really need it. Students from wealthy parents could find alternative way to finance their education. So improving the targeting of public expenditure in the area of higher education could help us ensure that expenditure effectiveness in higher education is further. We also need to have more bridges through the market. And this could be done through several ways. We could deliver more marketable services to the society. For example, our universities could, for example, deliver more health services. They could deliver more agricultural services to the communities. When I visited MIT in 2003, I realized that they had a very vibrant department which they called Industry Liaison Office, which was a very good interface between the university and the community. And these can yield some resources out of the services that are being delivered. We should also be much more active in community development, because many donors do not want to support higher education. Most donors would feel much more comfortable in supporting basic education, but very few donors will support higher education because, according to them, higher education is a service for the elite. But donors are supporting agriculture, they're supporting the health, and they're supporting many areas where universities have expertise in and could deliver services on. So we could tap into some funding by investing more and engaging more with the communities on these sectors, and also by delivering marketable services. So here are very brief statements based one on the main challenges we are facing in the area of higher education in Africa in general and Francophone Africa in particular, and some solutions that could be considered going forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Mabawe for your exposition and sharing your thoughts and making that analysis about that economical analysis about what it also means in Africa when there is a law that no one really should be left behind. But this learning, this education online is causing us a big, a lot of challenge. But there are different points that were attended that we'll continue looking at. We'll now ask Professor Paulo Speller to continue.
Well, good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure for me to be here from Brazil. I'm not in Africa at the moment. I have been in Africa quite a while. I have been living in Mozambique for a couple of years, and I have been traveling around the Portuguese-speaking countries. I have been to Senegal, I have been to South Africa. So I'm quite acquainted with some of your countries. And I have been quite close to some of you, being Mozambique, not far from Zambia, from South Africa. Anyway, here I am in Belo Horizonte in Brazil right now. So nice to meet you all. Thank you very much to be here as an invitee. When we talk about the challenges of education in Africa, of course, we have some major challenges which are not much different from what we have been facing in the past and even today in Latin America and the Caribbean, such as literacy and quality education, which if most or all of you have touched somehow, these are big challenges in Africa, and these are big challenges in our region, across the Atlantic, in Brazil and elsewhere in Latin America, in Nicaragua, in the Caribbean, in all the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. So I'd like to put forward some ideas, and at the end, I want to put forward a proposition, a project in which we are working at the moment with the support of Kairós, with the idea, of course, of not letting anyone behind. That's the idea which you have also touched upon. And so the context in which I am going to talk is the context of the World Conferences on Higher Education promoted by UNESCO, especially the first one, which took place in 1998 in Paris, when one of our friends and member of Kairós, who is with us now, Marco Antonio Diaz, was right in the front stage conducting this magnificent conference in Paris in 1998. And this is the context in which I want to talk a little bit about higher education in Africa, in Latin America, and everywhere. And at the end, we'll see, trying to put together both regions somehow, trying to address some of the difficulties, some of the challenges, more particular challenges that you have touched upon on your presentations in different countries, but they are somehow the same. Of course, the World Conference in 1998 was crucial when it stated that higher education and universities especially were strategic for any project of a national development. So to talk about national development means to put right in the midst of the central stage the university, both public and private. At that moment, the major concern was with public universities. There was the next conference in 2009 in Paris again. I was quite involved, as was Ana Lucia Gazola, who is also with us, who conducted a magnificent regional conference in Cartagena in Colombia in 2008. And I was right there trying to help her. She was our leader. And we had a magnificent regional conference. That was the second one in Latin America. The first one was in 1996, just before the World Conference in 98 in Paris. And the first one was in Cuba, in La Habana. It was a splendid conference as well. And finally, we had a third conference, a third regional conference in Cordoba, where, again, a member of Kairós was at the front stage conducting and organizing the conference. Francisco Tamarit, who probably is with us also as one of the participants of this webinar. But what I want to discuss and present to you is the idea of a project which was put forward in Brazil of an Afro-Brazilian university. An Afro-Brazilian university, which is known by the acronym of UNILAB. It was organized from 2008, and we started to organize it with the conference. Professor Ali, I don't know if Professor Ali is with us from Senegal, because we had the regional conference of higher education in Dakar at the end of 2008. And I was there to put the idea, to present the idea of the Brazilian government to put forward to organize an Afro-Brazilian university, UNILAB. And we have discussed it. I have presented it in Dakar at the regional conference of UNESCO in Dakar in 2008. And we have now 6 African Portuguese-speaking countries which are involved in this university, which are Guinea-Bissau, Guinea Equatorial, or Equatorial Guinea in English, Cape Verde, Cabo Verde, Mozambique, Angola, and Santo Tomé e Príncipe. So we have 6 countries we are now represented at UNILAB in Brazil. The university has just celebrated its 10th anniversary in July, last month, 2 months ago. And almost half of the students come from those 6 countries. At this moment, what we are realizing is that despite the fact that the Portuguese-speaking countries are a minority in Africa, because as you have already presented, most countries are English-speaking or French-speaking countries. And also many other different languages. I remember when I was in Mozambique, we had to speak Shangaan, we had to speak so many languages, which were common language somehow for the communication with the neighboring countries, with Zambia, with South Africa. There is quite a migrant movement from Mozambique to South Africa, for instance. And the mining workers from Mozambique are able to communicate with their fellow workers from South Africa, for instance. No? But anyway, the 6 Portuguese-speaking countries, they are not together. They are not in the same region or in the same sub-region in Africa. And there is a process of sub-regional integration of those 6 countries with their neighbors. Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau, for instance, are quite integrated in the regional organization, which encompasses also Senegal, for instance. It is the same in the southern corner of Africa, in the case of Mozambique and South Africa and Zambia, as another example. In Angola as well, on the Atlantic side. So there is a process of integration. And what is very interesting is that in those Portuguese-speaking countries, in those 6 Portuguese-speaking countries, there is a process also of integrating the languages spoken in their neighboring countries. Not only the national languages, but also the colonist languages. It is the case of Mozambique, for instance. No? Mozambique is a very interesting case because all the neighboring countries from Zambia, South Africa, Malawi, they are all English-speaking countries. So what is happening? Mozambique is still a Portuguese-speaking country, but it is now a member of the British Commonwealth because they are incorporating the English language, and more their youngsters are learning, are speaking English. The same is happening with Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau with French, for instance. Angola has a duplicity because some of the neighbors speak French and others speak English. So both languages are being incorporated into the secondary level of education, especially for the youngsters. No? In this sense, there is a process of sub-regional integration of those countries. I'm not talking about Brazil and Portugal, as you can see, which are also Portuguese-speaking countries. I'm talking only about the African Portuguese-speaking countries. Of course, Brazil and Portugal and East Timor in Asia also have a quite intense relationship with those 6 African Portuguese-speaking countries. But at the moment, let's come now to the proposition. The Unilab continues, the university is right there with half of their students coming from those countries. After 10 years, we have already professionals in the agricultural area, engineering, teachers of science and mathematics, public administration. Those were the main first careers that we have organized at Unilab. Now we have 35 different careers in all areas, from health to engineering to social science, humanities, so on and so forth. But in the context of COVID, and considering what we have been remembering about the 2 World Conferences on Higher Education organized by UNESCO, I'm trying to recuperate the main idea of those conferences, that universities are central, are strategic to any project of national development, and especially in the context of COVID-19. So the pandemic crisis, which has embridged all of us in the planet, in Africa, in Latin America, and everywhere, gives us a tremendous opportunity to advance, as some of you have already mentioned, in accelerating the incorporation of new technologies, in developing new technologies. And this is what is happening somehow everywhere. The incorporation of new technologies, of artificial intelligence, is a process which is accelerating more and more and more and more and more, and we try to cope with it in Brazil, in Senegal, in South Africa, in Zambia, everywhere. In Nigeria, of course, no? In Nicaragua, everywhere. And we are putting forward now a new project with the support of Kairós, of course. Kairós, I think, with the idea of not leaving no one behind, would be central, because Professor Telemaco has a large experience in higher education. He was the Minister of Higher Education in Nicaragua, so he's very much acquainted with the idea. So I'm here to support this idea from Kairós, which Professor Telemaco, with all his enthusiasm, brings to us, of putting forward such a project. And we have already identified some of our partners for this project. It's a project of virtual mobility. All of us, all of you have spoken about the process of digitalization, virtuality, new technologies, but we have to take advantage now of what is already being doing and is done in other countries, in other regions. And there is a project which has been put forward in Latin America, which is called eMovies, which is a project of sharing activities, sharing disciplines, sharing credits, which have already been implanted in different careers, in different universities in Latin America, from Canada down to Argentina. And Brazil is included in this project, of course. We are a kind of a weird, a different country in Latin America. Telemaco understands what I'm saying, in Alta as well, because we are the only country where a different language is spoken, especially in Latin America. They all speak Spanish, and we are the only ones speaking Portuguese. So the initial idea of this project is to work out with the 6 Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa and Brazil, bringing together universities which are already in this project, the e-movies, which is sponsored by the Inter-American University Organization, OUI, which is seated in Canada, in Montreal. And I am already discussing with them in the sense of sharing their experience, sharing their technology, implementing this project in different Latin American universities, of putting forward a project between Latin America and Africa. Starting with a pilot project, one pilot project between one Brazilian university and 1 or 2 universities in 1 or 2 of the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. Might be Cape Verde, Mozambique, Angola, Guinea Equatorial, Guinea-Bissau, Santo Tomé, it doesn't matter, any of them. But we are already discussing with them, and this is a project that I'd like to share with, because all the challenges that you have presented, all the challenges that we are facing worldwide, and specifically in your countries, in other African countries, in Latin American countries, press up us to put forward propositions which take advantage of the new technologies, the new experiences, the new projects, the new initiatives, which are already being developed in different regions of the planet, in this case, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. And now, putting forward our 2 regions, Latin America and Africa, so that we could offer, as we are already offering in Latin America, as we could offer in both directions, from Brazil to Mozambique, for instance, and from Mozambique to Brazil in a pilot project. And we have to evaluate this project, we have to control this project, because what we are putting forward on the table is the possibility that a student in Maputo can take a discipline, a number X of credits in Porto Alegre, or in Belo Horizonte, or in Rio de Janeiro, or in São Paulo, in a Brazilian university. He can take it on campus, because you have all mentioned the difficulties, as we also have the difficulties of giving an instrumental technology to every individual student. The inequalities which characterize our countries, the data that have been presented here about the African continent as a whole, giving the examples of specific countries, makes it in the short term absolutely impossible to think that we can buy and give each student its own individual equipment. But in the case of this project of e-movies or virtual mobility, what we are talking about is about the possibility of having a whole course developed in Porto Alegre, in Brazil, for instance, which can be taken by students across the Atlantic in Mozambique, in Maputo, or in Beira, or Nampula, whatever. No? And if it works, and I think it will work, we can then discuss, and this is the idea of putting it forward to the other 5 Portuguese-speaking countries, and then sub-regionally in each region where those 6 countries are, opening it up for other countries in the African continent. Because I repeat it, it's an enormous possibility for our Brazilian students as well. And Telemaco is already organizing a next conference on the term of interculturality. And this is absolutely central for the education of higher education students in different careers. They must understand what the planet is, what the reality is. It doesn't mean that all of our students have to go to Mozambique or to Nigeria or to South Africa or to Zambia to understand what is going on. And the same, African students can come to Brazil, to Latin America virtually. That's the idea, to offer the possibility of taking courses from one side and the other side. What are our partners in this case? UNESCO is involved directly in this proposition. I have been discussing it with IESALC, which is the Institute of Higher Education for Latin America and the Caribbean, which is in Caracas, in Venezuela. Professor Francesc Pedro is the Director General of IESALC. So UNESCO would be one of our partners, both regionally in Latin America, Caracas, IESALC, and UNESCO as a whole, but more specifically IESALC in Latin America. We are also beginning to discuss it with the Association of Portuguese-Speaking Universities, AULP. The Vice President of AULP for Brazil is, again, a member of Kairós, Professor Sandra Goulart, who is the Rectoress of the Federal University of Minas Gerais. So we want the Association of Portuguese-speaking countries to be also involved through the Vice Presidency in Brazil with Professor Sandra Goulart. We are also involved in the Forum for the Management of Higher Education, FORGES, which is seated at the University of Lisbon University in Portugal. I am already discussing with them, and they have invited me for a meeting on the 10th anniversary of FORGES, which will be at the 18th of November, next November, in a couple of months, at the University of Évora in Portugal. I hope it will be a face-to-face meeting, but if not, it will be a virtual, as we are doing right now. But we are relatively optimistic about that, so we might discuss this project right there with some of our partners. We are also involved in the organization of Inter-American University, the Inter-American Organization of Universities, OE, which I have already mentioned, seated in Canada. They are the ones who are sponsoring this experience of the e-movies, the virtual mobility, already in Latin American universities. And so, of course, 2 universities, which we are discussing with them in the 6 countries, 2 universities from one, Mozambique, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea Equatorial, Santo Tomé, or Angola, which will be involved in the first pilot experience, the first pilot project that we are planning to put forward and to develop. And of course, finally, one we are already discussing with a couple of Brazilian universities which are participating at the e-movies, at the virtual mobility project in Latin America, which will be our partners in this pilot project with Portuguese-speaking African universities. So this is the context in which we are putting forward this project. And Kairós, finally, Rectoress Alta, Kairós Telemaco is directly involved, as we are here discussing this idea to put forward this pilot project. So it's been a real pleasure to be with you today, and I hope we can continue this discussion in the near future, more specifically talking about this project and talking about this pilot experience that we plan to initiate at the beginning of next year, 2021. Thank you very much. Kanimambo. Gracias. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Professor Paulo Speller, for your presentation. I'm not going to comment. What I'll do is try to have a little negotiation with the panelists, because I had offered 3 minutes, but no, we don't have that 3 minutes. So will it be okay with each and every one of you that we do 1.5 minutes? Okay, so then we will start with Professor Tawana Kupe. Professor, reaction?
Thank you. I think I only focus on one thing that was raised by Professor Kambikambi, is how we mix a youth entrepreneurship into our university curriculum. We at the University of Pretoria offer a free online entrepreneurship course to all students. We also have a program for Ready to Work. So because we believe now that we train our students to go both into professions that exist now, so they get a course for Ready for Work, then some will not want to work for anybody, they want to work for themselves. So they can opt to do the free online entrepreneurship course. That course is also coupled by a mentorship scheme by people who are alumni of the university who are successful in business. We also offer, through tax innovation, a startup advice and link with venture capitalists. On top of the fact that for the professional degrees, we have industry advisory boards. People who are actually active in industry, they advise us on our curriculum, and they also advise the students. So I think that is going to improve graduate unemployment, youth unemployment, and link society closely with the universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Tawana, for your comments. We will then continue with Professor Charles Igwe. With last reactions.
On mute. Thank you, moderator. I think we've arrived at a stage where we'll begin to think about what to do considering the new normal, which is post-COVID-19 era in our educational development. And in going forward, moving forward, we have to think about enlarging the scope of our ICT facilities in addition to what we have on ground. We have to think about increasing the present bandwidth of our internet system in such a way that we'll be able to cope with the online learning program. And how do we achieve this? It's going to involve a lot of money, a lot of funding. It means that we're going to face challenges of funding. And this funding, government should begin to think about increasing funding in education and related area. And we know that most national and international governments are very poor, and but we'll begin to think about international grants and international loans, such as has been practiced in terms of NEPAD and the related organs, so to say. And we think of having some international and national discussion within national government and the AU government. And we have to increase our collaboration among universities in the continent. This should be in the form of exchange programs and resource exchanges, including facilities and experiences, so to say, by some national and international universities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Charles Igwe, for your comments. We'll continue with Dr. Tamala Kambikambi.
Thank you, Prof. I wondered if you had forgotten me.
No, never.
Of course. My last words to do with the pedagogy itself. I think in this new normal, we have an opportunity because in the ordinary pedagogy, we're spending a lot of time, or teachers are spending a lot of time planning and marking, and this takes a lot of time. But with the new normal and a lot of use of technologies and these devices, I think we can leverage time to free it so that we allow teachers to do what they're meant to do, which is the actual teaching and interacting with the students as they also interact with themselves, so that we actually have a lot more teaching and a little less of the administrative side of teaching. So all I'm trying to say is that let's change how we are interacting and using these technologies in teaching, because if we don't, and we're just doing exactly what we used to do, but with the devices, then we haven't gained anything. So let's change the pedagogy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Tamala Kambikambi, for your words that are very, very useful. We will continue with Professor Amadou Mabawe.
Hello, Madam Chair. I would not be long, just to acknowledge the commonality of some challenges. We can see that some challenges are here throughout Africa. And we should try as much as possible to set up spaces or spheres where we can develop a fruitful dialogue among us, and also learning from what is happening from outside Africa. I think this is very important. Developing a dialogue, a space of dialogue which is permanent among African leaders in the area of higher education, but also putting bridges with other stakeholders worldwide to exchange experiences and to share lessons. I think this is very important. One area where such lessons can be nurtured and drawn is, for example, how to assist African countries to improve their rankings. We have had some rankings published recently, and most African countries, apart from South African universities, are lagging far behind in those rankings. Might be we should try to develop synergies to figure out how to improve our respective rankings, and also try to share lessons and experience on how to engage with our population to deliver community services. This is important, and also how to deliver quality education while at the same time minding about inequalities, making higher education much more inclusive. So these are some challenges I was thinking of. And as a network, I would really encourage us developing ways and channels through which we could collaborate in terms of exchanging experiences, sharing experiences, developing joint activities, speaking with one single voice on issues of common interests, things like that. So functioning as a network in order to address individual challenges we are all grappling with. So I'll just leave it here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Professor Mabawe. Professor Paulo Speller, last remarks.
Thank you, Professor Alta. First of all, I want to congratulate Professor Telemaco for this webinar. I think that this is a historical day for us in the sense of the contacts, of the privilege that we have had of hearing directly from you what is the reality of your universities. We have had an extraordinary sample of important universities in Africa, in Senegal, in Zambia, in Nigeria, in South Africa. And I think the bridge which has been mentioned here, which we are starting to build at this moment, is in our hands, Telemaco. And we have the means to do it. This is what is important. If we want to improve our rankings, as Professor Ali has mentioned, we want to improve our evaluations, we have to, again, remember what UNESCO told us in 1998. Our universities have to be pertinent. That was the term used. They have to be pertinent to the reality of our countries. I don't know if in my university, Unilab or University of Mato Grosso in Brazil, where I have been a rector for 8 years, could be ranked together with Oxford, Yale, and the MIT. But what I should ask myself, and what we should ask ourselves, I think, is in which way my university is being pertinent to Mato Grosso. The university, the Federal University of Mato Grosso, is it being pertinent to building up a more solidary society in my country, in my region, in my city? So again, this is something we have to think about. And one of the means of doing that is sharing. Sharing what you are doing very well, what we are doing very well. We are not Oxford, we are not the MIT, we are not Cambridge, but we are all doing things that are pertinent to our reality. So I think this is the biggest challenge now, putting together those experiences, building up a project as we are trying to do at this moment, and using the technology. This webinar is a splendid example of what technology can do, because maybe in the past someone would say, wow, to do this seminar, this is a seminar. To do this seminar, we have to have a meeting in Pretoria or in Dakar, or have to buy the tickets, pay the hotel. I have to have the time to take a plane, go, stay, return, full week, the jet lag, etc., etc. Oh, at the last moment, no, I can't go because I have a meeting in my country. And look what we're doing right now. We're talking with someone in Sweden, someone in Nicaragua, someone in Brazil, someone in Zambia, someone in South Africa, someone in Nigeria, someone in Senegal, and the cost is zero. The cost is our time. So we are investing our time in new possibilities. So as we said in Mozambique, in Xangani, Professor Kupe will understand me. I think Professor Tamala also. Kanimambo. Obrigado. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Paulo Speller. Really, this whole, this panelist has been very, very good. It has addressed a lot of challenges that we have to find a way to solve together when it talks about the disruption of education, when it talks about education online, which is something that, as the doctora spoke about, that teachers aren't so well accustomed or use them too much, and that teachers need to be prepared. And the whole educational system needs to be reorganized. That's what I understand from the different presentations. And also that we need to learn from each other. That's very, very important. I said earlier that the 17th of this month, the network of indigenous, intercultural, and community universities will be participating. They would also be sharing their thoughts and their ideas. And Ingeniero Telemaco will be directing the process. The network asked him to do this. The network asked him for a space in Kairos. And of course, he said it was there precisely for that. And he also said that he'll try to have Dr. Tamarit doing the last comments, which is the one that precisely organized the last CRES. So I want to thank you all heartily for sharing your thoughts and sharing your ideas with us. At this moment, then, we will have a short biography of Richard Gerber, and then we'll have a video before last comments. Okay, so Richard Gerber is author of the renewed bestseller, Change, Learn to Love, Learn to Lead. Gerber is a former school principal and first advisor to the UK government, and has been innovation as one of the basic pillars for the change required today. He has been described as one of the most inspiring leaders of his generation, yet he maintains that his work focuses on 3 words: communication, empowerment, and impact. At this moment, we will have a video made by Dr. Richard Gerber.
Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be with you today, even though it has to be virtually. We have been living through some extraordinary times, haven't we? And it's a really interesting and important time to reflect on the future of education for our children in Africa, across the whole world. You know, when we've been dealing with change, and particularly during the change and uncertainty we felt over the last extraordinary few months, we go through phases of the way we feel. Something I think we've all experienced during the many years we've been debating what the future of education should be like, but certainly it's been amplified during the last few months. You know, often when we think about change, when we realize change is necessary, we start with a kind of paralysis. Maybe we start to deny that change is really necessary. Sometimes we become angry at those people or those factors that are causing the change. And sometimes we even fall into a kind of depression, really not sure where we should go or what we should do. And with COVID, with the future of education, with all of these things, the important thing is to move on in our phases of change, to ask critical questions. And that's really what you've been doing today. We need to become explorers. And if we're to equip our children for their future, a world that is going to turn faster and be even more uncertain than it is now, we need to turn them into explorers. We need to create young people that aren't controlled, don't just do what they're told, but actually look around them, challenge convention, collaborate, be creative, innovative, work together to solve problems. And if they can do that, if we can do that now on reflection after this event, then we can start to create an activation. We can start to create some real systemic change in the system. You know, and where we have to start is not by playing around the edges of change in education. We need to go right to the heart. We need to understand fully our set of vision and values for the future of education. And that's really just what I want to pick up on with you now. I'd like to introduce you to a few people that have helped me understand the challenges we face. And I'd like to introduce them to you now. So the first is Manoush Shafiq. Manoush Shafiq is a remarkable woman. She's a director at the London School of Economics and was, until recently, somebody many considered would become the first female governor of the Bank of England. A couple of years ago at the World Economic Forum in Davos, she said this. She said, anything that is routine or repetitive in the future will be automated. The soft skills, the creative skills, the research skills, the ability to find information, to synthesize it, and to make something of it. That's what the future will require. And really, when you think about it, that's what we need to be designing our education system around. And by the way, at the same event, she went on to say something equally as powerful. She said this: it's no accident that people who voted for populist parties around the world are people with, by and large, low levels of education. And it's not because they're stupid, it's because they're smart. They figured out this system will not be in their favor. And we have to ask really hard questions about why people feel that way. You know, so many of the people that have voted for populist uprisings and political upheaval, whether it be Brexit or Donald Trump or Bolsonaro in Brazil, are good, decent people, but they're angry because they haven't been given the things they were promised. You know, they were taught and trained to do everything in the right way at the right time, to be managed, and that they were then told that if they did those things properly, their lives would be secure. And that just isn't the case. We need to think bigger, and we need to think differently about how we help our young people not just survive, but thrive in a world of extraordinary change. Let me introduce you to my next great hero. This is Barry Barish. Barry Barish won the 2017 Nobel Prize for Physics. We talked at length about the kind of people it took him to put into his team, the team that went on to win a Nobel Prize for their work in gravitational waves. And you know, one of the things he said to me that day, two things actually, will stick with me forever. The first thing he said was, Richard, I'm not interested in siloed people. In other words, he didn't put anyone in his team who didn't have arts as well as science in their background. He said, for the future, for innovation, for any success, you need to have rounded individuals. So in education, we need to stop siloing everybody into single channels. The second thing he said, which for me is one of the great drivers and one of the great comments, he said, you know, nobody made it onto my team unless they had the ability to ask stupid questions. And just stop and dwell on that for a minute. What does it take for people to be able to ask stupid questions? The courage, the confidence, the self-belief, the awareness, the ability to collaborate and share. Wouldn't it be great if, as we leave today's events, the first thing we went on to discuss with our peers and the people who weren't able to attend was how do we ensure that our educators and our children are in an environment where they feel safe and confident enough to ask stupid questions. Because, of course, the one thing we all know is you learn nothing new by getting something right. You only ever learn something new from the point of a mistake or the realization that you don't know something or you can't do something. So in order to learn, it takes huge courage. And are we making sure that our young people are equipped with that courage before we even try the complex? The last hero I want to share with you is a meeting I had with probably the greatest, proudest moment of my professional life. I got the chance to meet a couple of years ago with President Barack Obama. And there's something he said that day to me that I want to share with you now. He said, you know, Richard, when I look back on my 8 years in the White House, the one thing I think I've learned above everything else is this, that most of the problems that crossed my desk, the problems that crossed his desk, he said they weren't technical by nature. They were personal. When you strip most of those problems back, they were to do with humanity. They were to do with love, anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, tribalism. He said, and actually what we need to understand with education is we will not find the answers to the future in the technical. We need to ask first the human. And that brings me to my final point today. I have a cycle of learning that I want to share with you now. It has 4 stages to it. First, is that we need to have an absolute commitment to working with our children to develop their love of learning and of life. And most importantly, the way we design a curriculum to ensure that those 2 things are connected. To do that, we need to harness and develop a curriculum built around not just knowledge, but also around skills and competencies. We have to make that curriculum matter. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that we apply learning in context. So it isn't just abstract. And we're not just saying to young people, this will be important one day. In order to make learning really matter, it has to matter now. It has to make the heart beat faster. So how do we design a system that does that? And the 4th point or part of the cycle is how we measure that success. And yes, we have exams and tests and assessments, but really the true value and power of education can only be measured when we raise children's aspirations and sense of value. So that's how we need to go about building an education system. I hope you've enjoyed the incredible inputs today, been stimulated by the experts you've heard from. And now you can go forward and make a real difference for all our children everywhere. Good luck to you. Stay in touch, and thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that video. I'm sure it helped each and every one of us to continue reflecting on the discussion that we have had. And we will have now Dr. Tawana to share the last comments with us. And Dr. Tawana, you have 5 minutes, please, before we close.
So I'll do less than 5 minutes. I think we've had a very long evening now. So what I would say is that I agree with all of my colleagues that what we need in Africa is to put in place the necessary digital infrastructure to be able to make sure that online learning, even in its blended mode, is accessible to everybody. Professor Charles Igwe, I think, made a point I made at the beginning of the pandemic here in South Africa, that we need a collaboration at various levels, not only at the national level, but also at the international level to realize this goal of creating the infrastructure and the access that will enable everybody to participate. Otherwise, then you will actually have many people left behind. Because right now, access to digital infrastructure is for the minority, or access to digital infrastructure even for those who have, is very uneven and very unstable and very expensive and not reliable. What you need is a reliable quality system that nobody thinks about. Then we need, many of my colleagues pointed out, we need to engage in a collaborative process of curriculum creation and building, which enables everybody to be able to take courses from wherever. Because the digital connections make knowledge boundaryless or borderless, which is what you want to happen. And also it enables research partnerships that are like that. So We need to rethink internationalization, both in a regional sense, but also in the global sense. Then, of course, I think that we mustn't assume that people sitting in front of a computer know what they are doing or can use that computer and those digital resources effectively. That needs also to be taught. How do you get most effective use of the digital resources? There's a lot on the internet, there's a lot online. Not all of it is of the same quality, and not all of it is the best of what we can produce. So I'll end by saying what is now needed also is a global course on digital media and information literacy, how to select the best from the best, and how to create the best yourself and add to the global store of knowledge online. So, and I think that that is an African challenge, but it's also a global challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for your remarks, Dr. Tawana Kupe. I want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank each and every one of you for all that you have shared with us today, which is very, very useful. And there are a lot of issues that need to continue being addressed. But there is one that I would like to repeat, and it has to be that we need to go back to the heart. I agree strongly with that. Also, that the need of putting people in their context and reorganizing education for people in their context if we really don't want anyone to stay behind. Kairos is a very, very important moment where we can all be sharing our ideas and sharing our experience. Especially for me, being with African leaders of higher education, I'm very, very proud to have had this opportunity. I'm an Afro-descendant. And then it fills you with a lot of much more energy. And it gives you more idea of innovation and creativity and empathy. I would like to invite all of those that aren't members of Kairos to be able to be part of this big effort that we are doing, directed to be able to have an education where no one will be left behind. Thank you very, very much.